Hey everyone, welcome to A Great Alternative. In today's episode, number 13 of the cordage series, I'm going to be making cordage from nettle. So there's two main reasons that I've left making cordage from nettle until now, until episode number 13 within the series. Even though, when you go searching for making cordage from natural materials, nettle fibres is one of the first things that comes up, and also one of the most saturated for making cordage from a natural fibre. Well, that's one reason. It's also because I want this video to not just be a beginner's video, I want it to go just a little step further. So it's not just surface level, how to make nettle cordage quick and easy. I mean, it is that. One of these is that. But it's also a few steps extra, but not as far as spinning with nettle. So I'm going to get into how many we got here. 6 different types of nettle cordage that I've made, and then obviously I'll go through the same kind of stuff that I go through in every single episode, which is IDing the plant, obviously its other kind of uses, but also how to harvest, prepare and store, with a heavy chunk on various ways of preparing it and getting it ready for the different types of cordage. And then after that, my evaluation on what one I would recommend for different circumstances. First up though, let's crack on with the script for the general facts about nettle cordage, and for me, as always, to get some kind of Latin completely wrong. Urtica dioica, often known as common nettle, burn nettle, or stinging nettle, is a herbaceous perennial flowering plant in the family Urticaceae. Originally native to Europe, much of temperate Asia and western North Africa, it's now found worldwide. It has spreading roots and is able to form large patches of upright stems that are 0.9 to 2 meters, so 3 to 7 feet tall, with dark green foliage. Leaves and stems are covered in stinging and non-stinging hairs. The soft, strongy serrated green leaves are 3 to 20 centimeters, about 1 to 6 inches long, and grow opposite one another up the stem. Cream or brownish green catkin-like flowers are produced from the leaf axils from late spring to early autumn. The species is divided into 6 subspecies, 5 of which have many hollow stinging hairs called trichomes on the leaves and the stems, which act like hypodermic needles, injecting histamine and other chemicals that can produce a stinging sensation upon contact. The stinging nettle is a very common plant and can be found growing in gardens, hedgerows, fields, woodlands and many other habitats. Its preference for damp, fertile and disturbed ground makes it a good colonizer of places enriched by human activities, such as agriculture and development. Stinging nettles are great wildlife attractors. Caterpillars of the small tortoiseshell and peacock butterflies use them as food plants. Ladybirds feast on the aphids that shelter among them, and seed-eating birds enjoy their autumn spoils. The plant has a long history of use as a source for traditional medicine, food, tea, and textile in ancient and modern societies. Historically, nettles have been used to make clothing for almost 3,000 years. More recently, companies in Austria, Germany, and Italy have started to produce commercial nettle textiles. Nettles may also be used as a dye, producing yellow from the roots or a yellowish green from the leaves. Nettles have many culinary uses. Young leaves are best and can be used in a variety of recipes, such as polenta, pesto, soup, pasta, stew, or even fried and made into crisps. The seeds can also be used in varying ways, as they are a subtle stimulant and have an earthy, nutty flavour. Also, nettles have a number of uses in the vegetable garden, including the potential for encouraging beneficial insects. Since nettles prefer to grow in phosphorus-rich and nitrogen-rich soils that have recently been disturbed, and thus aerated, the growth of nettles is an indicator that an area has high fertility, especially phosphate and nitrate, and therefore is an indicator to gardeners as to the quality of the soil. Nettles contain nitrogenous compounds, so are used as a compost activator or can be used to make a liquid fertilizer, which, although low in phosphate, is useful in supplying magnesium, sulfur and iron. First up, don't wear shorts. It's a silly idea. So, but I don't need to tell you that because you're not daft like me and you wouldn't wear shorts around stinging nettles because clearly that's a daft idea. Harvesting. Either you can snip at the bottom or I find sometimes just pulling them up, and then I've got nice thick leather gloves on. Just do this. Be careful not to be sort of vigorous but not too vigorous because you don't want to then, again, like that. Don't wear a t-shirt either. Wear long sleeves and long trousers. But if you do get stung, dock leaf works as a great placebo, but plantain works even better. Chew it in your mouth, rub a little bit of plantain, works wonders. But for today, so give it a wipe like this. There we are. That's it. Ready for the next stage, which is going to be crushing it. One of my favourite bits. Don't you dare. Also, before I go, how cool is this t-shirt? Made by my amazing wife. It's totally one of a kind because she printed this herself using bleach and leaves, as you can see. Such a cool idea. And I thought this would be a great little opportunity. So this channel it started out as both of our kind of creative outlet. It was meant to be a bit more about our homesteading journey. And because that's not really happened as of yet, it's become kind of my creative outlet. So therefore, she started her own channel, which is her creative outlet, where she does things like this. So there's not got a video of this exact thing yet, but it's got painting, making dresses, totally different kinds of things. So if you're interested in this channel, you'll probably be interested in that. So go check out Alicia's Artful Fancies because yeah, I really want to support her. I think it's amazing that she's doing her own she's got her own kind of creative journey. And just like me with this channel, it's just making stuff that makes you happy because that's what we all should be doing, right? Anyway, crushing. Okay, you don't have to do that method. You could also use something like a stick or a rolling pin, like I did here, to kind of bash them, especially where the nodes are, or use it like a rolling pin. If you're using a rolling pin or a stick like I am here, you can use both methods. Super easy, and yeah, it just sort of separates those fibres and makes the next step that bit easier. To begin processing, split the stalk lengthwise, peel off the inner pith to isolate the bast fibres. I'd recommend trying out different methods for yourself as the age, size and thickness of the stem can vary how the fibres peel away, but a preferred method is with the inner stem facing outwards to snap halfway between the nodes, then gently pull the outer fibres away from the stem. You don't have to do it this way, as you can sometimes just pull from one end and it will all come away in one, but I've found there's a much higher success rate with keeping as much fibre from each plant as possible when you use this method. So now, on to preparation. So I tried a few different methods for preparation. First up, I'm going to go through the easier ones, and actually the ones that I felt were more successful. First up, the simplest. Get the material that's been taken off the plant, dried, and then give it a rub. Sometimes when I've been walking, I put it like this, and it just kind of sits there comfortably, because otherwise it very easily kind of gets stuck together. And you can kind of pry it apart, but yeah, I find just working on bits like this, but it's going to get you covered in stuff and make you a little bit itchy. It's fine, it's fine. It's part of the creative process. Also, what I found was that unlike on some of these days, I've gone a bit too vigorous and got hot and my hands have got sweaty. It's not what you want, because you're putting moisture back into the thing that you want to keep dry and soft. Next up, I'm calling this method scraping, and this was where I used a butter knife, or here, this was actually before I got the butter knife, I used this little thing, very similar, just a thin, not super sharp piece of metal, knife, whatever, you can even use stone, and you're just scraping while the plant is still fresh, you're scraping that green matter away from the inner fibres, and quite quickly you'll see, like you can see here, the green will disappear and reveal that beautiful white fibre. There were two downsides to this. Although it was super simple to do because you're just scraping, it was quite fiddly, and I found it quite difficult to get really nice long fibres, because what ended up happening was I was tearing the fibres, and it was really difficult to go between tearing the fibres and only scraping off the green matter, if that makes sense, especially over the nodes. So what I ended up with was lots of material. Again, it was lovely, beautiful white colour, and it's just those fibres, but it wasn't very long. Next up, with the stuff that I had rubbed, I did attempt to do carding. Now, big disclaimer, this was my first ever go at carding. So I had a quick go with some wool first, and then realizing that I don't really know what I'm doing, I just thought, let's just have a go. Let's just go for it. So I was using the stuff that, like I mentioned, had only been rubbed. It didn't really go so well. And I feel like that's because a lot of that green matter is still connected. So it was just, imagine really knotty hair, you know, it was just getting caught up in the carding tools and splitting all those fibres, ripping all those fibres apart. Now I am 100% sure there's something I'm doing wrong, or there's something in the process that I need to delve into more. So really, I'd love to learn more from someone who really knows what they're doing. But a lot of the videos that I've watched have been about spinning, and I think this is what you want, because as you can see here, I did end up with a lot of material that would be good for spinning, but it was lots of very soft but very small, very short fibres. And what I really wanted was lots of long fibres. That's what I wanted to end up with, the same as what I've got here, which is nice long fibres still connected together. So therefore, in this instance, where I'm not necessarily going to spin with it, I didn't feel that it really worked for me, and it was better to just not have done this process whatsoever. The last thing that I attempted was to try and ret the nettles. This is something else that I've seen in my research, where you get the nettles once they're fresh and you've just taken all the leaves and things off, you go and put them in some grass, and then that grass, with the dew on the grass and with you constantly, maybe say every day or so, giving them a turn, the pile will turn around, and what happens is they start to break down, and therefore the fibres will naturally come away from the pith on the inside. So these were on the grass for about a month or so, and as you can see here, they definitely, life was really all amongst them, and they really did basically start to rot, you know, start to break down. So now again, I was just trying to separate those fibres from what was inside, but I found that the fibres had started to break down. So therefore, when I was trying to scrape them off, I tried splitting them and I tried stripping them in different ways. It was very, very brittle and just broke away in my hands. And then not only that, I ended up with all this sort of rotted matter within them. So I then tried to give them a wash, and that just turned into this big spongy mess. And so I had some that was all big spongy rotten mess, and then another set that I hadn't done that with. I decided to leave it there that day, let them dry, and then once they were dry, give them a rub. And what I was hoping is, just like with the other stuff where I'd just given it a rub and therefore ended up with something that was a great material, I thought that might be the same for this one. Okay, well that's just totally ruined the lens. What I ended up with was just a bit of a big ball of fluff, really. The fibres weren't very long. I very much am sure that it's not great. A disclaimer, I should have obviously been wearing a mask at that point, but I only did it for the camera for a few seconds and I was outside. So I just didn't really think it was that successful, because if I was going to spin with this, it still stank of rotting stuff, if that makes sense. So it needed more work. You could wash it further. I'm sure I could still work with this as a material, but to then try and make cordage, like I've been doing with the other examples and the other tests that I've been doing, this one was the least successful out of all of them. So again, something to research and try in future videos where I am going to potentially spin with it, but for this particular video and what I've been testing in this one, this was definitely by far an experiment that didn't work, that wasn't successful. Oh well. One extra thing I want to mention before I get into evaluating these is that the way I'm going to evaluate them is not from the context of using them for textiles. This is specifically for cordage. So there we have it. 6 different variations of nettle cordage. I'm not going to get into exactly how I did it in this. If you want to see that in a more detailed way, watch almost any of the other videos, but it's a very simple 2-ply cordage. So it's a case of getting the fibre, twisting it, it will kink at one point, and then it's twist over, and that's it. Very simple, and that's really why everything's made in the same way. First up, let's go with the two that were done with this material. So that's where it's basically just straight off the plant and either made fresh or, nope, made fresh or dried first, re-soaked by just a quick spray with a bit of water, and then made cordage from that at that stage. Overall, I would say, which I'm quite surprised at, they came out basically the same. Now, I would normally say if you're going to do something when it's fresh, like fresh off the plant, it's going to dry loads, get really brittle, and then become basically not usable once it's dried. It's still very flexible. It hasn't dried and separated that much, so maybe it had actually dried quite a bit, like I'd left it on the side for maybe an hour or two. I can't totally remember, but my guess is it was almost semi-green, if that makes sense. It was semi-dried, so that's why it hasn't separated and shrunk much after drying. And actually comparable, if not just as good as, drying it, so it, you know, getting to this stage and then having it later on. I mean, I can't really say that this one is any better, but overall comparable to almost every other cordage that I think I've made on this series, where most of them have just been taken off the plant, dried, and then made cordage with. This is a great cordage. Strong, pretty supple, not super soft, but for most things, this is a good cordage. What would I use these for? Almost anything. Because not a lot of effort has gone into making them, maybe you could use them as more of a throwaway cordage. So maybe you use something, it's going to be outside, it's going to get damp, then weaken and fall apart and not that long, that's okay. Or you could use them in all the different decorative and more aesthetic ways, because they're really flexible and they're, yeah, just a great cordage. So almost anything, really. Let's move on next to this. This is just the same thing, but hours and hours of that. And what you end up is with a fairly soft, fairly kind of fluffy, fibrous material. And also you get nice long fibres like this, which just makes life a lot easier when you then come to make cordage, because the longer the fibres, the quicker you can make vast amounts. Let's put these aside. And next, so we've got nettle like this. So this is where it's just been rubbed. So, and when I say rubbed, that's the term that I've been using for this. That's what I mean when I say rubbed. And then we have another one that's rubbed first, and then using these, attempted to card. So I've attempted to kind of get some more of that green matter away using these. However, like I said in the preparation stage, didn't really work. Similar to the other two, I would say these are just as soft as one another. That's probably because, like I said, I haven't done a lot more carding to one of them than the other, which is why it's not a very different product between the two. But what it actually is this was about another hour's worth of work just to get to the level of trying to do this. And as I'm telling you now, or as I found out, that hour was, I mean, it was good learning, but not really, you can't really notice it in the end product. But overall, I think these are a great cordage. Obviously, they're much softer than the stuff made out of this material, these first two, because you've got rid of a lot of that green matter, and that's the stuff that's sort of scratchy. And for example, if I was to use this as a necklace or as a on the wrist or whatever, it's not that bad. It's still fairly, yeah, it's still fairly soft, which again, compared to most of the stuff that I've done on this channel, I think, if not all of them that I've done so far, yeah, soft rush, I mean, soft rush, because it's quite solid, is quite soft, but not really. Almost all of the cordages that I've made so far aren't anywhere near as soft as this. So this one, I wouldn't mind it next to my skin, like I said, as a piece of jewelry or something. And therefore, it becomes into a different level. So would I recommend these ones? Yes, absolutely. There is one downside. It's seemingly doesn't feel like, oh, it's not much work, because you get it to this stage and then all you do is this, And the way that I made it work for me was while I went out with the dog, obviously not while it's raining, but while I went out with the dog and it was dry, I'm just walking along and rubbing while I'm doing that. And it just becomes something that I'm doing something else. Obviously you could just be sat in the garden doing it. In future, I want to see if I can find or maybe even make different implements that make this stage quicker and easier. But it is a very time consuming and fairly, you put a good amount of elbow grease into it. I did watch a video by Sally Pointer and she was like, she lured me into a false sense of security with this stage thinking, oh, I don't really want to use that much effort and I want something that's fairly, you know, it makes a nice sort of material but doesn't take much work. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I certainly put a lot of work. To get this to this stage is a fair amount of elbow grease and a fair amount of time. So that is definitely a consideration when you're making this cordage, is the difference between the two is hardly any work at all versus potentially a couple of hours worth of work. Maybe a bit less, but a couple of hours you definitely get to this stage, especially with a quantity like this. Even so, I still think this is probably within the top 3, if not the top 1 cordage that I've made so far. Unsurprisingly. What do I recommend you use these for? Anything and everything. Because they're soft, I think they'll work as things that are going to be, for example, jewelry, stuff like that, but also they can be used as workhorses. I didn't mention these were twisted dry, if that makes sense. So I didn't re-soak them. So therefore the end result is just, it's supple when it was twisted. It wasn't re-soaked and hasn't dried stiffer like so many of the other cordages. So it's just such a great cordage. This is going to be pretty much a workhorse. You could use this for almost anything. Yes, obviously it's not going to stand up to modern cordages or things made with like wool, for example. It is going to fall apart over time, but overall this is probably for almost any use, I would say this is a perfect cordage for. Lastly, 2 variations, one where I made it fresh and one where I dried it, rubbed it a bit and then made it. And this is from nettles that have been scraped. So this where when they're fresh, using the butter knife, I've tried to scrape it away and end up with just that white fibre. Like I mentioned in the preparation stage, the big downside with this one is you end up getting rid of a lot of those fibres. So you end up with, I don't know, I don't know how long that is, a few inches worth of fibre versus the stuff that you would get if you kept it all complete. So it is a very time-consuming way to make cordage. And that's why these 2 here are strings, because when it's very thin, it's pretty, it's a nice color because it's just a plain white, so therefore you probably could dye this, and also keeps that strength because this is purely just fibers, none of the green matter, so it's just those fibers, so it's a nice strong cordage to work with. But like I said, very time consuming. So would I recommend it? First up, is there a difference between the 2? So just to clarify, I stripped this fresh while it was kind of semi-green, so it was drying. I sort of left it outside for a little while to dry. I then made this into cordage, whereas this one was left to dry. I then rubbed it, similar to this, to try and get rid of any of that last bit of green matter, and then twisted. The main difference is the color. Still got some of the green matter in it, so therefore it's still got some of that green in it. Whereas this one, almost all of that has been got rid of. Would I recommend this to you? Absolutely. It's a great cordage, and I think this is great, but this would be great for a string or something that is either very decorative or going to be used as kind of as a workhorse, a string. So something you're, making a garment, you're sewing something together and you want to use natural materials. I think this is great for that because it takes so long to make. To me, it makes most sense to then make it into a thin cordage because then you're still getting the most length out of the material itself. Whereas something that's like rope thickness made of this is going to take weeks. So therefore, is it really worth that amount of time? Up to you. To me, no. If you've really enjoyed this video and you haven't maybe watched some of the other videos, then please go watch those other videos. Also, I do make a cheat sheet from each one of these episodes. If you're interested in one of those, then please help us out. Give us a bit of dough on Patreon and you can get access to those cheat sheets. If you haven't got loads of cash, then what you could do is sign up for 1 month, download all those cheat sheets, and then sign off again until maybe you've got enough money to help us out again at a future stage. That's absolutely fine. I'm not expecting people to sign up and then just stay signed up forever, because yeah, we don't all have access to loads of dough. Otherwise, if you don't have money to help us out, then please just like, share, subscribe, all of that jazz. I think this series is something that I'm feeling quite proud of as I grow, and I want it to be a great library of information for people who are looking into getting into this, whether it be they're weavers, whether they're artists, or whether it be from more of a bushcraft or even a botanical point of view. I kind of want this to be a great resource, and also prove to yourselves, as much as it's proved to myself, that you can do this as a beginner. You don't have to have extensive knowledge about different plants and things. You can do it and get out there, be creative, and yeah, just make stuff. That's what it's all about, right? Just get out there, have fun, and make stuff. I think that's a good way to end it, more than anything else, eh? Thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.